From the heartland of America and the gateway to the West, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. Later tonight, living in a world of chaos. Here's what's happening. French regulators say Apple's iPhone 12 is emitting too much radiation and order the company to pull the product from French markets. France's National Frequency Agency has informed Apple that it will monitor updates to the iPhone 12 to determine whether they can reduce the radiation output. If the updates are not successful, the agency said it will require Apple to recall the product. Apple, however, argues its product is in full compliance with regulations. A Tennessee family recently had to make the difficult decision to, listen to this, amputate their 14-year-old son's hands and feet to save his life after what started as flu-like symptoms in mid-June. Matthias Urabe visited a doctor for treatment twice after he began experiencing symptoms on and off between June 30th and later on. He was transferred to an emergency room where his heart stopped. He then went into cardiac arrest. He needed life-saving support and was flown to two different hospitals. He was diagnosed with pneumonia and streptococcal toxic shock syndrome, which affected his hands and feet, and they had to remove them. My gosh. U.S. inflation-adjusted incomes fell for the third straight year in 2022, but overall income inequality decreased, according to new Census Bureau data. Ms. Sedlock, investment advisor with us. Well, this is not good news, Mish, is it?
No, and we've been talking about it, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
Down for the third straight year, incomes dropped in real terms, inflation-adjusted 2.3%, the biggest decline since 2010. Now, what's kind of interesting about this is we've discussed many times recently the difference between gross domestic product and gross domestic income. Now, I'll just repeat the numbers for you. The last three quarters for gross domestic products were plus 2.6%, plus 2.0%, and plus 2.1%. The gross domestic income numbers, and income is what people get, what businesses sell for selling their products, and what they pay, their employees. The product side should match the income side. Gross domestic income, the last three quarters, was down 3.3%, down 1.8%, and up just a small 0.5%, a half of a percent. I told you that I believe the income numbers. The Census Department is confirming what we're talking about. Unfortunate thing here is, George, it's September of 23. We're just now talking about these numbers and revisions for 2022. Today, the CPI, the BLS produced the CPI numbers up 0.6%, and it crunched the numbers for more recently. And let's discuss wages here since 2021. And I crunched the same numbers with the same data and came up with the same numbers that the BLS did. That's assumes you believe the CPI. But wages for all workers in January of 2021 were $29.92 an hour on average. They're now $33.82 an hour on average. That almost a $4 an hour raise. It's about a 13% increase, but when you adjust that for inflation, and the BLS and I came with the same numbers, workers are making 35 cents an hour less than they did in 2021. And so, someone asked me yesterday on Twitter, George, why is consumer sentiment so bad? Why does it feel so bad when the economists tell us the numbers are so good and that wages are high? And that's it. Adjusted for inflation, George, wages are not high. And let's discuss one more thing that came out of the CPI report today. The price of rent has gone up at least 0.4% every month for 25 straight months, George. So someone who has a house and lives in a house and got a mortgage at a really good rate is doing okay. But someone who's renting and wants to buy a house now is looking at interest rates, mortgage rates of about 7.25%, Meanwhile, they can't afford that. They can't afford the rent because it's gone up 25 straight months, almost 0.5% each month.
Crazy times, Mish. Thank you very much. And on the heels of that, baby boomers who transformed society in so many ways are now having a dramatic effect on homelessness. Higher numbers of elderly living on the street or in shelters add complications and expenses for hospitals and other crisis services. The humanitarian problem is becoming a public policy crisis paid for by you. Aged people across the U.S. are homeless in growing numbers, in part because of the supersized baby boomer generation, which since the 1980s has contributed large numbers to the homeless population, which is now old. Howard Bloom, author of The Genius of the Beast, with us. Howard, this is a very sad, delicate situation.
Yes, and it relates directly to what Mitch was talking about when he talked about rents. A story appeared at 10 a.m. this morning in the Wall Street Journal and exposed a hidden crisis called the silver tsunami. It's a tidal wave of homelessness among the elderly. That senior citizen homelessness today is 5 times what it was in 1990. So who are the homeless elderly? Baby boomers, just as you revealed. A privileged generation of Americans, most of whom can expect to live 10 years longer than they would have in 1960. The flood of homeless boomers are sleeping in their cars, complete with their possessions, and their cats and dogs, or sleeping on sidewalks at a time of life when they are often beset by health problems. If they try to get into a shelter, they're often rejected because they can't sleep in a top bunk. They simply can't climb into it. They need help bathing, and the shelter has no extra hands to help them. They need, or they're in a wheelchair, and the wheelchair is not built for wheelchairs. One result is that the elderly homeless' bodies are physiologically 20 years older than the bodies of their peers. Now, what are the causes of this silver tsunami? It's back to Mish. America's increase in rents is the cause.
Yep.
A retired baby boomer Social Security check is a meager $1,800. But in Naples, Florida, for example, rent is $1,000 more. Rent is a whopping $2,800. That puts housing totally out of reach. The new senior citizen homelessness could easily happen to you or me. Imagine that you've worked all your life, but low wages and high rents have kept you from saving. So when a crisis hits, when your spouse dies, when your car breaks down and needs expensive repairs, or when your health breaks down and you need medical care, it wipes you out. You can no longer afford the rent, you are evicted, and you are forced to couch surf with friends, to live in your car, and finally to live on a sidewalk where valuables like your cell phone will be stolen over and over again. Again, skyrocketing rents are the cause, and that's a tip-off to another crisis, a housing crisis. We haven't built enough homes for our citizens, especially for our poorer citizens. Nationwide, we need to build 7 million more homes and apartments. Now, where is this housing going to come from? From an industry that provides a vital service, the for-profit real estate industry. And building real estate is expensive, which means that when new housing is constructed, the rent for an apartment will still be too high for many of the elderly. And government housing is not going to happen. The party that now controls the House of Representatives wants to decrease the social welfare programs that would provide the needed houses and apartments. On the other hand, the solution many on the left favor is rent control. But the real estate industry points out that if rents are controlled, the developers who should be building housing will stop dead in their tracks for a simple reason. They won't be paid a fair wage for their labor. They won't make a profit. Rent control is often permission to steal services from developers and landlords. It requires landlords to pay the taxes, supply the heat, and maintain the building. If those costs come to $2,000 a month and a rent-controlled tenant pays $1,500 a month, the landlord is now subsidizing the tenant at the rate of $500 a month. And that $500 a month is coming out of the landlord's pocket.
Well said. Howard Bloom, his website, howardbloom.net. A story we have in our highlight reel at coasttocoastam.com. What were alleged to be 1,000-year-old non-human alien corpses presented in glass display cases before the Mexican Congress during its hearings on UFOs. They are non-human beings that are not part of our terrestrial evolution, said Coast guest and Mexican journalist and ufologist Jaime Maussan. He testified under oath. As two small mummified specimens seen with 3 fingers on each hand were unveiled, Maussan said researchers at the Autonomous National University of Mexico have conducted carbon-14 analysis that determined the corpses are around 1,000 years old. It's an amazing story. We've got it up in a highlight reel at coasttocoastam.com. In a moment, Randall Fitzgerald back with us. His new work is called The Tao of Intuitive Luck, Winning at Games of Chance and the Game of Life. Let's check in with him next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. George Norrie with you. Randall Fitzgerald back with us. Began a journalism career back in 1974 in Washington, D.C. as an investigative reporter for syndicated columnist the late Jack Anderson. He has since written for the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and for 20 years was an editor with Reader's Digest. Randall is the author of a number of books, including Lucky You, Proven Strategies You Can Use to Find Your Fortune, and his latest book, which we'll talk about tonight, is called The Tao of Intuitive Luck, Winning at Games of Chance and the Game of Life. Randall, welcome back.
Hey, George. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
What was it like working with Jack Anderson?
Well, Jack Anderson reminded me of a Mormon district attorney. He came across as a prosecutor in the way that he pursued his investigations, and he had a lot of politicians in Washington, D.C., who were afraid of him, and with good reason, because he was like a dog with a bone. When he got on a story and he was investigating, he didn't let up until he came to a resolution of whether a person was guilty or innocent of the corruption that they were being accused of.
He broke some major stories, didn't he?
He did indeed, quite a few. In fact, he was on Richard Nixon's enemies list as a result of all of the stories that he broke in D.C., and I was very privileged to arrive on his staff that week in August of 1974 that Nixon resigned as president. And I began work that week and was able to see Jack Anderson and some of his other investigative reporters like Les Whitten in action. And I learned a lot from those people, I must confess.
How did you make the switch from investigative work into writing about luck?
Well, it turned out that I had some experiences for better and worse in the 1990s that seemed to involve luck. So I had always been curious about what it was. Is it an energetic force that we can somehow control or trigger, or is it simply the law of averages? Is it probability theory, as the mathematicians might say? And so I began investigating it in the early 2000s, and that's how that first book came about, called Lucky You, which was an examination of many people, lucky people's stories about how they became lucky. So ever since then, George, and you had me on your show a couple of times, Lucky You, over the last couple of decades, I've deepened my examination of this subject, both in terms of interviewing people that are legitimately lucky, but also in interviewing the scientists at the forefront of parapsychological research, which is at the heart of luck. And I found that there truly is an intersection between intuition and luck. And in fact, a lot of billionaires like Elon Musk and Oprah Winfrey, they always talk in terms of their intuition and how far they got with their intuition, but also how far they got with luck. So the more I looked, the more I discovered that there was this intersection between luck and intuition, and I began to call it intuitive luck, thus the current book, The Tao of Intuitive Luck.
Is it accurate to say that we make our own luck as opposed to it being just simply luck?
Well, there is happenstance. Obviously, life throws us curveballs that are unexpected, and we have to, depending on our experience in life and our skill sets, we're going to navigate those situations for better or worse and be, in the aftermath, considered either lucky or unlucky. But the deeper I looked at this subject, and I investigated the whole idea of probability theory and the law of averages from the perspective of mathematicians, and there was something missing. There was something missing in all of those attempts to explain luck solely on mathematical principles, and that X factor was simply human consciousness. Human consciousness can trigger streaks of luck, and it can short-circuit streaks of bad luck. And so I wanted to know what do we do? What can we do in order to initiate these sorts of triggerings? And, in fact, there's a lot of research, and it's that research in the realm of parapsychology that's immersed me for the last couple of decades.
Randall, do you know Professor Joseph Gallenberger by any chance?
Well, yes. He is. He's in my book. He's featured, in fact, because he was someone that had some extraordinary bouts of good luck. And the more I looked into what happened with him, the more I discovered that, in fact, he was using intuition, a heightened state intuition, in order to be very lucky in games of chance.
And attitude. And he has taken groups to Las Vegas that are upbeat and happy. Then he's taken other groups that are not on purpose. And he said time and time again, George, the unhappy people come back losers. It's amazing.
Yes. Yeah, this is the interesting aspect of it. And I tried to dive into every angle on the subject. One angle is about our attitudes, our beliefs, our habits of mind, how all of that together is like a container, and it contains and it holds that energetic force of luck and intuition. And the more we're able to control our minds, our habits of minds, and shape our beliefs and attitudes in a way that facilitates intuitive luck, the luckier we become as human beings. And Joseph Gallenberger is a case in point. Much as he's done with his seminars and bringing people to Las Vegas, he has written a lot on this subject, and he was one of the guiding inspirations that I use in my own book to show that it's a synergy that's created from a variety of factors. I call it the 5 intuitive luck factors. And one of them is about cultivating intuition and how to go about that. I was very interested in the how-to aspect of this. And there's a lot of research by Gallenberger and others about the specifics of how we can, step by step, go about making ourselves luckier.
The title of your book, The Tao of Intuitive Luck, Tao, of course, means the natural origin of the universe. Well, after the break, we'll have you explain, Randall, how that ties into what we're talking about, because you deal with two important aspects of luck. That's luck and intuition, and they fit together, don't they?
They do indeed, George.
Without that combination, what do we have? What's left?
Well, what's left is that we're at the mercy of happenstance. We're at the mercy of serendipity. When we lose our awe, A-W-E, important word, about the universe and about life, then we become not only jaded and cynical people, but we become people that are at the mercy of whatever life throws our way. I'm interested in how we can gain more control over what life throws our way, and that's one of the reasons why intuitive luck plays such an important role.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back in a moment with Randall Fitzgerald, his website, the Tao of IntuitiveLuck.com, and Tao is spelled T-A-O. And we've got that linked up for you at coasttocoastam.com. More to come when we come back. And welcome back to Coast. George Noory along with Randall Fitzgerald. We're talking about his book, The Tao of Intuitive Luck. Randall, is there any science behind this that backs up the evidence that we're looking for about intuition and luck?
Indeed. If we look back at the entire history of parapsychological research, starting in the early 1930s, it was all initially about studying games of chance and gambling. At the Duke University lab of J.B. Ryan and his wife, Louisa Ryan, they were studying dice throwing and card playing. Those were the initial experiments that they did in order to determine why some people were lucky at dice and some people were lucky at playing cards. And those experiments in the 1930s attracted a lot of attention at the time. In fact, even Albert Einstein, this is not well known, but starting in 1930, he took an interest from Germany in this whole realm of parapsychology and the research being done. And he even wrote a foreword to a well-known book at that time called Mental Radio by a man named Upton Sinclair, who was writing about his wife, who had obvious intuitive luck abilities. So the entire field of parapsychology got its start in the realm of games of chance and gambling, and that accelerated in the 1980s and then the 90s when people like Dr. Darrell Bim of Cornell University, a psychology professor, got involved and started doing peer-reviewed experiments that appeared in science journals. And then you've got, of course, Dean Radin of the Institute of Texas and Marilyn Schlitz and some of the other scientists there who have done a lot of studies in connection with heightened states of intuition, what we call parapsychology in the form of precognition and psychokinesis, mind over matter, and so forth. So this entire field has developed over time to where now it's pretty widely accepted in those areas where this research is being done that intuitive luck exists. It's just that we haven't put in the popular literature this terminology in a way that people can understand it, and that was one of the reasons that I wrote this book.
And gambling in casinos is not the only barometer for testing luck and intuition, is it?
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, casinos are luck laboratories. There's no doubt about that, but
right.
So is the stock market. When people use their intuition above and beyond the data crunching they may do and mathematical formulas they may adopt and their experience in investing, intuition plays a big role in stock investing. So the entire stock market over time, as many of the successful investors will attest, has a lot to do with not just being lucky in terms of events, but also being intuitive in being able to forecast and then, like a surfer, ride a streak of investing luck.
Randall, I've got an old saying that timing is everything. What do you think of that?
Well, certainly the ability to sense timing based on your own level of intuitive guidance is important. Timing is not totally about the law of averages or about probability theory. As I pointed out earlier, there is this X factor of human consciousness and the ability to sense the rhythms of time and timing and to get glimpses of the future through lucid dreaming and dream incubation, for instance, those techniques which I try to describe in the book in great depth. So, timing, it's, as you know, George, there are a lot of factors involved, and I think it's apt for you to say that timing is everything, but the control that we can exert also exists in order to make timing advantageous to us.
How much of luck is influenced by the genius behind the person? You mentioned Elon Musk. Let's talk about Jeff Bezos from Amazon. Came up with a great idea to sell books online, and then somebody suggested to him, why don't you just go more e-commerce? And it just exploded. So is there a common trait behind this as well that most of these successful people have shared?
In many respects, George. Remember the old Napoleon Hill book, Think and Grow Rich?
Right.
Where he interviewed dozens of business executives and the Carnegies of the world to try to find out what secrets they had in common. And he identified intuition as one of them, one of the keys that all of these people possessed an abundance in which they had brilliance, yes, they had genius, yes, but they had intuition that helped guide and channel that inherent intelligence level that they had in order to take advantage of luck opportunities. And that's true for the CEOs of today, the Elon Musk and Zuckerbergs, and go down the list. And all of them, in one way or another, talk in terms of intuitive power, not just of mental power or intelligence level.
And you mentioned some of the intuitive factors that are out there. You mentioned in the book 5. Want to run through them pretty quickly for us?
Sure. The first one is luck factor number 1, feel your intuition. Learn how to feel in your body. Where in your body do you feel intuition? And the first part of the book is all about that, sort of a how-to. Everyone feels a little differently. Some of us feel it in our gut. Some of us feel it in our heart. And there's a lot of research supporting that, indeed, gut hunches are real. The second intuitive luck factor is setting your intention. It's important to set an intention to be lucky, set an intention to feel your intuition, and go through the steps that are necessary in order to facilitate that. And then the third luck factor is quiet your mind. Learn how, through meditation techniques or whatever, mindfulness, whatever approach you take, in order to quiet your mind, to allow the intuitive voice, sometimes it's just a whisper, but to allow it to emerge in order to benefit you. And then the fourth is channel your excitement. The old idea of beginner's luck. Well, what is beginner's luck? Well, it's an openness. It's an excitement. It's not having preconceived ideas. It's not having blinders on. And that's important to this entire synergistic process, to be able to continue to channel your excitement like you were a beginner. And then the fifth and final luck factor is programming your dreams. There are lots of ways through lucid dreaming to incubate dreams in order to allow intuition to percolate to the surface from the unconscious mind, to get glimpses of the future, and to utilize the information that percolates in such a way that you seize luck opportunities.
You mentioned our show several times in your book. You had an incredible response when you were on with us.
Yes, the last section of the book is about emails and letters that I received from your listeners talking about their own luck experiences, and they were varied, very varied. There were people from actually all over the world that had heard your show, that tuned in online, and they were passing on experiences about winning in casinos and about synchronicities that had occurred that intuitively they were able to sense were going to be advantageous to them in some way by getting a new job or whatever it might be. There were examples that people gave of avoiding bad luck streaks as a result of being able to listen sometimes for the first time in their life, listening to their intuitive voice.
Randall, if you diligently practice these 5 steps you just pointed out, what should happen?
Well, the first thing that should happen is that there's a synergy that I have noticed for myself and also for others that I have interviewed in the course of researching and writing this book. A synergy that happens in which all of these factors together sort of influence and reinforce the other factors. And what I've noticed happens most of all is that it's easier to trigger luck streaks, and it's easier to be able to facilitate the short-circuiting of bad luck streaks, because in our unconscious minds, by following these 5 intuitive luck factors, the unconscious begins to respond, and it responds in ways to which consciously we aren't necessarily directing, but by setting an intention to make these 5 factors an integrated, natural part of our daily life, then we truly do become more intuitive and more lucky.
Randall, what is the cosmic trickster?
The cosmic trickster. The last section of the book deals with the cosmic trickster. It's an ancient idea. It's an energetic force that was recognized in ancient times among a lot of different cultures and traditions. To give you one example, in ancient Greece, there was the god Hermes. And Hermes was seen as a trickster. Hermes was also the bringer of good luck, but could trick people. And again, this was a perspective in ancient Greece. Hermes could trick people into thinking that they were going to be lucky, and then it would turn out to be bad luck. And this was one of the reasons why at the Oracle of Delphi and all the other dream interpretation centers that existed in ancient Greece, inscribed in stone before you entered to have your dreams read, there was the saying, "Know thyself." And know thyself is just as important today. The more we know who we are and what our habits of mind are, what our beliefs are that hold us back, the more we know our minds, the better able we are to become an unfiltered channel for the intuitive voice. In ancient times, we had Hermes, but then there were the Native American traditions of the coyote as being a trickster energetic. So all of that taken together had me put the label cosmic trickster, the sort of benefit our current understanding of the universe. The cosmic trickster is what can deceive us. And sometimes the cosmic trickster, George, is within our own minds.
That's true. How about Lady Luck?
Lady Luck, if you dance with Lady Luck, sometimes you're dancing with a cosmic trickster.
Oh, boy.
Again, if you don't know yourself and if you don't know your tendency for obsessive-compulsive behaviors, are you a problem gambler, for instance, and you're in denial about it? How do we delude ourselves into thinking we're listening to an intuitive voice when we're really listening to the cosmic trickster? I go into all of this based on interviews with psychologists about the habits of mind, and how do we identify when it truly is intuition that's talking to us? How do we separate intuition from delusion? And there are a lot of steps, there's a lot of advice, which I was able to accumulate from my investigation.
Randall, if somebody doesn't have luck, let's just say rotten things happen to them most of the time, what are they doing wrong?
Well, a lot of psychologists, including Joseph Gallenberger, who's a clinical psychologist himself, a lot of them point out that we self-sabotage our way through life in a variety of ways. Some people do it consistently. They're very good at it. Some people realize exactly how we self-sabotage, and we're able to adopt another way of being, another state of mind in order to short-circuit that process. Again, we're all guinea pigs in our own experiments in life. The extent to which we are able to get outside of our self-reinforced boxes about how we view what is possible in life helps determine quite often whether or not we are going to be lucky or not in the long term.
Interesting take. Randall, where do people get your book, The Tao of Intuitive Luck?
Well, of course, Amazon carries it, and if you go to the Coast to Coast website, you will find my website, The Tao of Intuitive Luck. I offer 2 free audios. You know, I was influenced by some people to sell these audios, but I decided just to offer them for free. And these are sort of how-to audios that supplement the material in the book, so you can go on to my website and download either of these audios. Each is about an hour long, and you'll learn a lot.
All right, we're going to come back in just a moment with Randall Fitzgerald and take calls next hour. Couple things, questions or stories, how you have used luck to apply to your own life. Share that with us.